Who is scarier? A person who has Proteus syndrome or a person who has paranoid schizophrenia? Today, I'm going to show you the diseases that made people look or think like monsters, and the last one is something you definitely know. We'll start with the disease that made the least effect all the way up to the most intense. Abul Bajandar. Born in 1989 in Bangladesh, this man started developing strange growths on his hands and feet when he was a teenager. His limbs started sprouting thick, bark-like growths that kept expanding. By the time Abul was in his 20s, his hands looked like tree roots. The condition made it impossible for him to work, feed himself, or hold his daughter. The growths were heavy and painful, and infections became a regular thing. Doctors eventually diagnosed him with epidermodysplasia verruciformis, an extremely rare genetic disorder that causes a person's immune system to completely fail at fighting off certain strains of human papillomavirus. Instead of healing like normal skin, the virus in people with this disease causes uncontrolled wart growths that mutate into scaly, bark-textured masses. There are less than a handful of documented cases like this worldwide. Abul ended up in a hospital in Dhaka after the condition got so bad he couldn't move his fingers anymore. He lived in a ward for years while surgeons tried to figure out how to help. Over time, doctors performed at least 16 surgeries to cut away about 5 kilograms of hardened, root-like growths. After the early operations, Abul got some mobility back and even started eating on his own. He could finally scratch his head or hold a spoon, which he hadn't done in years. At some point, Abul left the hospital and tried to return to his life outside. He said he missed his daughter and wanted to be home. But without constant medical attention, the warts started growing again faster than before. His hands began to swell and harden just like they had the first time. The hospital said they couldn't keep doing the surgeries forever, especially since the condition had no known cure. Abul kept begging for help, saying the pain was unbearable and that he couldn't live like that anymore. His family didn't have the money for private treatment, and government support eventually dried up. But Abul's case is just the first of the diseases that I will show you. You haven't seen any yet because you'll be more shocked with the next one. Mandy Sellars. Mandy was born in Lancashire, England in 1975 with a medical anomaly that left doctors completely baffled. Her upper body was average in size, but her legs and feet were extremely large right from birth. At first, medical professionals thought she had Proteus syndrome, a condition known for causing tissue overgrowth. That diagnosis stuck with her for years, even though it never fully explained the severity or pattern of her symptoms. Her legs grew so disproportionately that by adulthood, each leg weighed more than 95 kilograms. Standard wheelchairs couldn't support her weight, and custom equipment was constantly needed. Mandy kept getting worse over time. Even basic movement was a battle. The massive overgrowth of soft tissue caused sores, infections, and constant pain. Infections in her enlarged leg turned life-threatening more than once. Doctors warned her that continuing to carry that much weight on her legs could eventually kill her. In 2010, her left leg developed a deep infection that spread fast. Surgeons amputated the leg above the knee to save her life. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. The stump itself began to grow back abnormally fast after the surgery. Within 3 years, the remaining limb had doubled in size. It didn't follow the typical pattern of regrowth. It expanded in mass and volume like it never got the message that it had been cut off. It wasn't until further genetic testing that doctors discovered Mandy Sellars didn't have Proteus syndrome at all. She carried a mutation in the PIK3CA gene. That gene is responsible for cell growth regulation, and the mutation caused cells in her lower body to multiply uncontrollably. This made her one of the first known people diagnosed with a PIK3CA-related overgrowth spectrum disorder. While not a cure, those drugs given to her slowed down the rapid regrowth of her leg tissue and gave her a shot at stability for the first time. But if you think you've seen enough, just wait until you see the next person. Godfrey Baguma. Godfrey is from Uganda, and he's publicly known by his nickname, Sababi. It's Swahili, meaning ugliest in English. The name stuck after he entered and won a local Ugliest Man contest, which wasn't a random dare, but something he volunteered for when people started mocking his appearance publicly. Godfrey had a condition that led to extensive disfigurement of his skull and facial tissues. His head shape was highly irregular, with the forehead appearing unusually enlarged, the eyes deep set, and the jawline significantly misshapen. His lips were pulled out unnaturally, and his nose structure deviated sharply from anything that resembled anatomical symmetry. Doctors didn't publicly confirm the diagnosis, but several reports named the disease as fibrodysplasia. In the general sense, fibrodysplasia causes abnormal development of fibrous tissue where it shouldn't grow, and when it affects the bones and skull, it results in progressive disfigurement. In typical cases, bone turns into tissue or tissue into bone, and it doesn't stop. For Godfrey, this process aggressively targeted the facial region. His skull expanded and twisted in ways that broke symmetry. The deformation was visible from childhood, and it worsened over the years. His mother abandoned him when he was young, and he was raised by his grandmother instead. As Godfrey grew older, his appearance brought both isolation and unwanted attention. The contest that gave him the nickname wasn't something to be proud of, but it made him a recognizable face in Uganda. After the contest, he started getting invited to media programs, comedy shows, and low-budget acting gigs. That visibility eventually turned into a performance career. He leaned into music and became a singer, known for comedic and often romantic ballads in local Ugandan dialects. His music videos usually featured him as the main character singing to women, and the contrast between his appearance and the romantic themes of his songs caught public attention fast. Huang Chun Chai. Chun Chai is from a rural part of Hunan province, China. By the time he was 4 years old, his parents noticed unusual growth on the left side of his face. At first, it looked like a minor swelling, but it kept growing to his teen years. The tumor grew out of control. Doctors diagnosed Chun Chai with neurofibromatosis type 1, a genetic disorder that affects the growth of nerve tissue. His face kept changing shape as the years went on. The growth got so large and so heavy that it dragged his skin down to his waist. The tumor removed his ability to speak clearly, ruined his eyesight, made breathing harder, and caused constant pain from nerve pressure. One side of his mouth couldn't move. His left eye disappeared under layers of excess flesh. He couldn't attend school. He couldn't socialize. He couldn't eat without struggling. The growth ended up weighing around 25 kilograms. That's more than half the average body weight of a grown man in China at the time. It made balance difficult, mobility hard, and daily life almost impossible. Chun Chai lived with this for decades because his family couldn't afford proper treatment, and local hospitals weren't equipped to handle it. The tumor just kept getting worse. At one point, it was so large and heavy, it started affecting his spine and posture. He had to tilt his neck constantly to stay upright. The tumor pulled down on his muscles all day, which eventually caused spinal deformity. Chun Chai lived in isolation and rarely left the house. By his late 20s, Chun Chai could barely walk. He only got help after media attention made his case public. Doctors stepped in and agreed to do surgery. The first surgery was in 2007 at Fuda Cancer Hospital in Guangzhou. It lasted more than 10 hours. They removed about 15 kilograms of tumor mass from his face. Surgeons had to cut through complex nerve tissue and control bleeding non-stop. Chun Chai almost died during the operation from blood loss, but he survived. After he recovered, he underwent a second surgery in 2008 to remove another large section of growth. A third operation came later to reshape parts of his face and reduce pressure on his spine and jaw. Even after all three operations, Chun Chai still had remnants of the tumor on his face. His appearance remained altered. His speech was still limited, but he could walk again. He could eat without choking. He could see with one eye. The hospital continued follow-ups and expressed plans for more corrective procedures, but full removal wasn't possible without risking his life. Herbert Mullen. From a young age, Herbert showed signs of psychological instability, but it became more severe in his 20s. After the death of a close friend in a car crash, Herbert started to spiral. He became obsessed with religion, mysticism, and the idea that disasters had deeper meanings. Around this time, Herbert was formally diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. He began to believe he could hear people's thoughts and that others could read his mind. He bounced in and out of mental institutions, but his condition was never fully treated or stabilized. Eventually, he convinced himself that natural disasters, particularly earthquakes, were directly tied to human sacrifice. In his head, if people died, the earth would be satisfied and would not unleash destruction. Herbert began to think it was his personal responsibility to kill people to stop California from being destroyed by an earthquake. In 1972, Herbert started acting on these delusions. His first victim was a drifter named Lawrence White, who he beat into oblivion with a baseball bat. Herbert believed Lawrence had telepathically volunteered to be killed. A few weeks later, Herbert shot a homeless man named Henry Tomei in the chest. The next killings happened inside Herbert's own family. He shot his old friend Jim Gianera and Jim's wife Joan in their home. Then he killed Kathy Francis, a woman who had given Herbert Jim's address, along with her 2 children. At this point, Herbert thought he was preventing a massive earthquake with every life he took. His final victim was a man named Fred Perez, whom Herbert shot while Fred was gardening in his front yard. A neighbor saw the whole thing and wrote down Herbert's license plate. Herbert was caught not long after that. During the trial, Herbert rambled in court about people communicating with him using telepathy. He said the military had recruited him to stop earthquakes and that everyone he killed had sent him a psychic signal telling him they were ready to die. They found him guilty of 10 counts of murder and sentenced him to life in prison. Herbert spent the rest of his life locked up, moving between different California prisons until he died in 2022. John Hinckley Jr. John was born in 1955 into a wealthy and prominent family in Oklahoma, later moving to Texas. During his teenage years, John showed signs of detachment and social withdrawal, but these behaviors became more serious in his 20s. He dropped out of college multiple times, became isolated from friends and family, and developed severe depression. Around this time, he became fixated on the 1976 film Taxi Driver. particularly the character Travis Bickle. John watched the movie dozens of times, began dressing like the character, and started keeping a journal filled with violent fantasies. That film starred Jodie Foster, and John developed an obsessive interest in her, convinced that she was communicating with him through television and media. He started following her when she enrolled at Yale University, left letters and messages at her dorm, and even managed to speak to her once by phone. By late 1980 and early 1981, John became fully absorbed in this delusion. He settled on the idea that killing the President of the United States would somehow capture Jodie's attention and make her acknowledge his devotion. He began stalking then-President Jimmy Carter. After Carter's term, he switched his target to Ronald Reagan, who had just taken office. On the 30th of March, 1981, outside the Washington Hilton Hotel, John fired 6 shots at Ronald Reagan, striking the president, Press Secretary James Brady, police officer Thomas Delahanty, and Secret Service agent Timothy McCarthy. Reagan was hit by a ricocheted bullet that lodged in his lung. Brady was shot in the head and left permanently disabled. John was immediately tackled and arrested at the scene. The investigation into John's background revealed journals detailing his plans and delusions, especially the belief that this act would win over Jodie. His trial began in 1982, where the defense presented extensive psychiatric testimony. Multiple experts diagnosed him with schizophrenia, major depressive disorder, and a severe personality disorder with schizoid traits. He also exhibited erotomania, a delusional condition where the individual believes someone, often a famous person, is in love with them. After the trial, John was committed to St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C., where he remained for over 3 decades. Grady Stiles Jr. Grady was born in 1937 with a condition called ectrodactyly, a congenital deformity that caused his hands and feet to develop into claw-like structures. His fingers and toes didn't grow in the usual way. Instead, they fused together, creating limbs that resembled lobster claws. That visual alone landed him in the sideshow business early. His father, who also had the same condition, was already part of a traveling carnival, so Grady started performing as a child under the name Lobster Boy. As Grady aged, he leaned more on alcohol and violence. He couldn't walk, so he used a wheelchair to get around, which meant when he lashed out, it was always from a seated position. That didn't make it less dangerous. In fact, he built upper body strength from hauling himself around with his arms, and when he hit, it landed hard. She eventually left with the children. Then years later, she came back and married him again, swearing he had changed. That lasted until Grady got violent again, and it got worse from there. In 1978, when Grady's teenage daughter Donna got engaged to a young man named Jack Lane, he didn't approve. He didn't just argue or disown her. Matter of fact, he shot Jack in the back of the head the night before the wedding. Grady didn't deny it. He flat out said he did it and didn't even try to run. He was charged with murder, went to trial, and still didn't go to prison. His lawyer argued that no prison in the country was equipped to handle someone with his condition. A judge bought it. Grady got 15 years probation and went back home like nothing happened. After years of living with a man who killed someone and walked free, Grady's wife, Mary Teresa, started plotting. She hired a neighbor, a teenage boy named Chris Wyant, and paid him $1,500 to kill Grady. On the 29th of November, 1992, Chris walked into the house with a pistol and shot Grady in the head while he watched television in his underwear. Mary Teresa, her son Glenn, and Chris were all arrested. Chris was convicted of second-degree murder and got 27 years. Mary Teresa got 12 years for conspiracy. Glenn got life for being the middleman. Peter Sutcliffe. In 1981, he was arrested after a 5-year killing spree that left 13 women dead and 7 others severely injured. His attacks followed a consistent pattern. He'd usually target women late at night, often those walking alone or working as call girls. Police had interviewed Peter multiple times during the investigation, but failed to link him to the crimes until they caught him in a red light district with a woman and false license plates. Once in custody, Peter confessed almost immediately and gave detailed accounts of the murders, including specifics that hadn't been made public. During his police interviews and later at trial, Peter claimed he had heard the voice of God instructing him to kill them. He said the voice first came to him while working as a gravedigger in the 1960s and that it had persisted for years, telling him that he had a mission to cleanse the streets. 2 psychiatrists examined Peter and diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. During the trial at the Old Bailey, the prosecution accepted the medical diagnosis and initially planned to agree on a plea of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. But the judge insisted the jury hear the full evidence. The jury rejected the insanity defense. They concluded Peter was mentally competent and found him guilty on all counts of murder. He received 20 life sentences and was sent to Parkhurst Prison. Not long after, he was transferred to Broadmoor Hospital, a high-security psychiatric facility, after he was declared mentally unfit for regular prison due to the diagnosed schizophrenia. While at Broadmoor, Peter received regular psychiatric treatment, including antipsychotic medication, His condition reportedly stabilized over time, but his presence at Broadmoor remained controversial. In 2010, medical assessments determined that Peter no longer met the criteria for paranoid schizophrenia. He was declared mentally stable and was moved to Franklin Prison, a high-security facility in County Durham. There, he remained under standard incarceration conditions. Over the years, Peter was attacked multiple times by other inmates. In one incident, another prisoner stabbed him in the eye with a pen, leaving him partially blind. He died in 2020 because of COVID of all things. Rudy Santos. This man from the Philippines was born with one of the rarest physical conditions ever documented. It's craniopagus parasiticus. This condition caused an undeveloped parasitic twin to be attached to his body. From his pelvis extended an extra leg, 2 additional arms, and an incomplete head that lacked consciousness or function. The limbs of the parasitic twin had no independent movement or control, and the head had no brain activity. The malformed body parts were physically fused to Rudy Santos's lower torso, which made walking and even simple movement difficult. He could walk short distances with help, but prolonged standing caused pain due to the imbalance and weight distribution of the extra limbs. During the 1970s and 1980s, Rudy became a popular figure in traveling carnival circuits and sideshows across Asia. He performed under the stage name Octoman, a name given because he appeared to have 8 limbs. Show posters billed him as a man with 4 arms and 3 legs. His unique condition made him a major draw, and crowds came from far and wide to see him, but the attention never translated into lasting financial security. After the sideshow business faded out in the 1990s, Rudy retired from public view and lived in poverty. By the early 2000s, Rudy finally agreed to be evaluated by medical professionals in Manila. A team of surgeons and doctors from the Philippine General Hospital examined his case in detail. Imaging scans and blood tests confirmed that the parasitic twin shared Rudy's blood supply and was deeply embedded in his tissue and nerves. Ann Bevan. Mary was born in 1874 in London and worked as a nurse. She got married, had 4 kids, and lived a pretty normal life until she hit her early 30s. She developed acromegaly, a rare hormonal disorder caused by a tumor on the pituitary gland, which leads to the overproduction of growth hormone. Her bones didn't stop growing. Her jaw became massive, her brow thickened, her nose and lips swelled up, and her hands and feet grew much larger than average. There was no treatment available at the time, and no one was interested in helping a woman who didn't fit the beauty standards society worshipped. After her husband died, Ann was left to raise 4 children alone while dealing with a body that was changing in ways she couldn't control and that people found repulsive. With no steady income and no support, Ann entered a contest in a local newspaper that was offering money for whoever could claim the title of Ugliest Woman. It was exactly what it sounds like. She entered, won, and was immediately flooded with offers from freak shows and circus acts. She ended up working with Barnum and Bailey, where she was shoved in front of crowds that paid to laugh at her face. People stood in line to point at her, take photos, and whisper things they thought she couldn't hear. The press latched onto her story and kept calling her monstrous or hideous in headlines, making her a punchline across the English-speaking world. Her name became shorthand for someone repugnant. Through all that, Ann kept working because she had no choice. Every single penny went to her kids' education and living costs. The woman was doing 12-hour shifts, being heckled by strangers just to make sure her children didn't end up in the streets. Her medical condition kept progressing, and by the time she was in her 50s, she could barely move without pain. But she still got on stage, still played the role, still let people stare, because stopping meant starving. Her body never stopped growing in places it wasn't supposed to. Her health kept tanking, and there was nothing she could do about it. She died in 1933 at the age of 59. Joseph Merrick. From a young age, Joseph's body began changing in ways no one understood. At first, everything seemed normal, but by the age of 5, his skin started to thicken and form strange, lumpy patches. His head grew disproportionately large, his right arm became misshapen and useless, and his spine twisted. These deformities became more extreme as he got older, pushing him further out of normal society. His mother died when he was still a kid, and his father eventually kicked him out. By his teens, Joseph was completely on his own, trying to survive while people stared, mocked, and avoided him. With no other way to make money, Joseph joined a traveling freak show where he was marketed as the Elephant Man. Joseph's condition was initially thought to be neurofibromatosis, but modern experts believe he likely had Proteus syndrome, a rare disorder where bones, skin, and tissue grow abnormally. This syndrome wasn't even identified until long after he died, so in his time, there was no name or treatment for what he had. Dr. Frederick Treves, a surgeon at London Hospital, came to see Joseph at the freak show. Dr. Treves invited him to the hospital for a medical examination, where Joseph was photographed and examined. He could barely move his mouth during the checkups. After the freak shows were shut down in England, Joseph was taken to Belgium to perform. Over there, he was robbed by his manager and abandoned in a foreign country. He eventually made his way back to London, where he was taken in permanently by Treves. The hospital set up a private room for Joseph and let him live there full-time. He finally had a place to sleep, read, and be left alone. So what now? Are they monstrous? Are they not? I'll leave it up to you to decide in the comments. See y'all.